Another day, another Viva. Our last one. We're going to be answering the question, why did the hippie movement turn violent in 1968? Very excited for this one. So although the hippie movement started out as relatively peaceful with it was a movement that was geared because of an aesthetic vision, it turned violent due to 3 reasons. It turned violent, firstly, because of a series of political problems that pushed the youth toward violence. Second, because of the reevaluation of a lot of core traditional values that made it hard to reestablish any normalcy. And then thirdly, it turned violent as a side effect of the drug culture that played a role in the violence. So the hippie movement itself has its critics because in a lot of ways, or in some ways, it was a movement that was filled with incoherent ethics. Examples of these ethics are like basically hippies saying that they believe one thing, like in communism or like communal living, but then living a completely different way. So one example of this would be the hippie ideal of cultural diversity, when in reality most of the hippies were of European descent and a lot of the perspectives were European perspectives. Another examples of this, like incoherent ethical values, would be in the drug culture surrounding the hippie movement. Because if you think about it, drugs, a lot of drugs are only accessible to the upper class, and when most of your movement most of your movement is connected with drugs, who can afford this movement? It's going to be the wealthy upper class white people. And even the famous statement by Leary, who says, like, tune in, turn on, drop out, that's only possible for people that have enough money to drop out of society. So kind of incoherent ethical values there that a lot of people critique the hippie movement for. But we're going to talk about the kind of what happened, the chaos that happened following a few years of peaceful hippie movement, why they happened, and what led to this violence. So first, we really have to talk about these political crises that pushed youth toward violence. Probably the most big of these political crises is the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. This makes people from the hippie movement say, if a non-violent, peaceful leader of the civil rights movement is assassinated, what's the point in trying to peacefully protest and stand against? And this makes people turn towards violence. Another example of this, a political crisis, would be the Tet Offensive, which happened in January of that same year. In April, after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, students take over at Columbia in protest of segregation that was happening at the school. There's Paris riots that happen on May 6th. Another student group protesting. And then June 3rd, Andy Warhol is shot by a very radical feminist. And then on June 4th, Robert Kennedy is assassinated. And this is just one more leader who people said, if he is murdered and assassinated, what's the point in being peaceful anymore? July 23rd, there's the Cleveland riots and the Glenville shootout. Glenville, I think I spelled it wrong. Shootout that happened between police and black nationalists, and all these crises push the youth towards violence. I'm gonna get a plug so I can keep going, but basically what you need to know is that people were sick of being peaceful. They wanted to see change in America. After these assassinations, they saw that nothing was going to happen if they sat around and didn't move towards violence. And I think that Bernardine Dorn says it well when she says she's one of the leaders of I think she's part of the Yippies, yeah. And she was a lawyer. But anyway, she says, our job is to lead white kids into armed revolution. Kids know the lines are drawn. Revolution is touching all of our lives. Tens of thousands have learned that protests and marches don't do it. Revolutionary violence is the only way. So I'm going to try to plug this in with my foot. Nope. But anyway, people like her really sum it up well. And a great kind of one of the more humorous parts of the violence, because violence isn't humorous, but would be the Yippie protest and the Democratic Convention. So basically, the Yippies are a movement of political pranksters that did a lot of ironic stuff and absurd stuff to get people's attention and to draw people's attention to the absurdity of the Vietnam War, the Cold War, all the stuff. And they go to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and they have kind of a mock convention of their own in, I can't remember what park, but they basically have what they call a festival of life. They just want to have fun, have music, but they also know, because of all the stuff that's been happening with the assassinations in the spring, that there's some tension in the air in Chicago. And Mayor Daley puts up the barbed wire, he puts up the barricades, he puts the police, who, basically Mayor Daley says, I'm ready for, protests, and I'm gonna fight against them. And there's a lot of violence that happens, and that's the Yippies. So yeah, that's our first point, how a lot of political crises make people turn towards violence. And secondly, we're going to look at how a questioning of core traditional values makes it difficult to reestablish a normative culture, I should say. On November 22nd, the Beatles released their famous White Album. From this album, there's one song that sticks out to one man and makes him do crazy stuff. And that is the song Helter Skelter. And that leads us to Charles Manson. Fun guy, cult leader, crazy guy, who is also a musician that even did a collab with the Beach Boys. But anyway, Charles Manson was a leader of a cult in the San Fernando Valley. He attracted a lot of young girls and women, and he got people to murder other people. and he was inspired by the song Helter Skelter, which, according to Manson himself, he says that the message that this song gave him, quote, it's subliminal. It says rise. It says kill. Why blame it on me? I didn't write the music. So basically, Manson hears from the song Helter Skelter this call to an inevitable race war, and he sees it as part of this big prophecy and a call to start the race war, which is going to happen. And in his vision, white people need to die so he can start this race war. And so he starts by killing the actress Sharon Tate, along with 4 other people that were at her house in August of 1969. And he also commits 2 other murders of like a grocery store person and his wife. And on the fridge at one of these houses that he murders at, the words are written on the fridge, Helter Skelter, and basically his excuse for these murders. So this is kind of this, like, there's no coherent vision for society or normalness anymore, and stuff like this happen. And we can see that through Charles Manson mainly. Yeah, this like questioning of traditional core values is what the hippie movement was. If you think about it, it's this going away from the tradition that was established in like the 50s and saying, no, we want to redo everything. We want to make our society new and improved. And this leads to it being hard to reestablish any normalcy or any unified culture, which makes people like Manson come around and other cult leaders. We're going to talk also about Jim Jones and his Temple of the People. So the third reason why everything turned violent in 1968 was that the drug culture plays a big role in this increasing violence. There's obviously the Brotherhood of Eternal Love in, you guessed it, Cali, and they're basically the hippie mafia. They distribute drugs, and they have a psychedelic. They want to like establish a psychedelic revolution in the U.S. Great group of people. Top of the notch. And they stop kind of in 72 when there's a bunch of drug raids that happen all over the West Coast. And my cards fell. Yeah, but other than the Brotherhood of Love, another way we can see the drug culture playing a role in the increasing violence of the time is at the Altamont Free Concert, which was a concert put on for free by the Rolling Stones. They basically look at Woodstock, this amazing hippie festival and concert, and say, yo guys, we can recreate that. So that's what they do, except they put there's basically zero plan. It's like if I were to make a concert, zero plan. They don't really hire security. The stage they have is super low to the ground, so there's no barrier between the crowd and the performers. And there's also, it's like the 60s, so there's a lot of people just using drugs, high, drunk, you name it. If it's a music festival, it's there. So that was the case at this Altamont Free concert. And guess who the Rolling Stones paid to be their security? For $500 worth of beer, they paid Hell's Angels to be their security. So you got a bunch of Hell's Angels that are drunk and probably on like some type of drug, as the security guards. So things go south pretty fast. Hell's Angels are just beating the crowd. Not all of them, but there's just this violence that happens. And sadly, a teenager, oh gosh, I should have written down his name. He was killed, and other people were also killed. But this one teenager was wielding a gun, and Hell's Angels stabbed him with a knife, which is very sad, and a lot of other people died. So this is kind of a symbol of just how the drugs played a role in the violence that happens. Obviously, Rolling Stones wanted to kind of copy Woodstock, but didn't do such a good job. And oh my gosh, we're almost done. So yeah, that is we're also gonna look at Jim Jones and the People's Temple. I'll try to whip through this. Basically, Jim Jones was another cult leader. He was a champion for a lot of activism and civil rights and like equal rights for everybody. And he makes his cult move to Jonestown, this agricultural like commune or whatever, and not a very nice cult leader. Definitely under drug influence, using stimulants or amphetamines. I can speak, I promise. So that's Jim Jones, and he sadly led his people into what he called a revolutionary suicide when he got all of his followers, like 900 people, to drink fruit punch that was mixed or laced with cyanide. Yeah, I think it was cyanide. Cyanide. Oh, I can't speak tonight. And this is another example of drugs getting in the way, a lot of bad stuff happening. And Jim Jones says that if you're born in capitalist America, racist America, fascist America, then you're born in sin. But if you're born in socialism, you're not born in sin. So that's Jim Jones. What I'm trying to get at in this kind of short Viva is that violence happens in 1968 for three reasons. First is this all these political crises, namely the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, set off violence. And there's also after the re-establishing of like the shifting around in culture, it's hard to reestablish a cohesive normative vision. So that's another reason violence happens. And then also the drug culture played a role in the violence. So that is 1968 and part of the 70s, my dudes. This was officially my last Viva. And it kind of sucked, but that's okay, because I believe in being one take wonder, and I will stand by that because I don't have enough time to take 10 takes. So you're gonna have to deal with whatever this was. I hope everybody has a good life. I probably won't post again. So peace out. It's been fun. Not really, but whatever.